Greetings. I am speaking to you from my balcony in Krakow, Poland. And today we will discuss a very important development that could dramatically change the world, and that is the potential end of US dollar hegemony. All over the news recently, you can see headlines talking about the decline in US dollar dominance and the potential end of US dollar dominance. And this was triggered by the weaponization of the US dollar by the United States against other countries, notably Russia, which is dominating the news headlines recently with the Russia-Ukraine situation. But even before this situation, the US dollar was already in decline in global dominance. Shares of dollars in foreign exchange reserves have been already declining for years, if not decades. And the rate of decline is much faster in fast-growing economies like China. This is not a small matter. The end of US dollar hegemony will dramatically change the world, and that is because US dollar dominance underpins a lot of American power and leverage worldwide. US dollar hegemony enables the United States to one, borrow money very easily and cheaply with low interest rates, and that is because other countries want to acquire US dollars because it is widely accepted in international trade. And this has allowed the United States to accumulate $30 trillion of national debt, which is huge and would not be sustainable if US dollar hegemony ended. Second, US dollar hegemony allows the United States to levy sanctions and cripple the economies of other countries, and that you can see with what's happening to Russia and why Russia has been working so hard to counter US sanctions and reorient its economy to be more protected against US sanctions. Third, US dollar hegemony allows for higher international purchasing power for America and for Americans. America and US citizens can acquire foreign assets on the cheap and also enjoy foreign goods on the cheap, which gives the United States and its citizens greater relative wealth. I know in modern economic theory, a lot of people discuss the importance of, or the advantage of devaluing your currency to boost exports, but I personally disagree. I think a lot of modern economic theory is based on Keynesian economics, which I also very strongly disagree with. And if you really think about it, when your currency is stronger, you can acquire foreign assets cheaply and also enjoy foreign goods and services cheaply, which gives your people and your country greater purchasing power and greater wealth. And although other countries can sell more cheaply, that does not mean that their citizens will necessarily benefit from greater wealth that your citizens would if your currency was stronger. But I could talk more about this in another video, but that is briefly what I think about the situation with the strength of your currency. But moving on, number 4, US dollar hegemony allows for the United States to enjoy high liquidity with its currency, and that is very convenient and offers a lot of financial flexibility for people who hold US dollars, and that's a major benefit for the United States. And 5th, US dollar dominance allows the US government to get away with printing a lot of money to finance its budget. And that is, again, because of the high demand for US dollars, because other countries and other foreign entities and foreign individuals all want to acquire US dollars because it is so widely accepted on the international trading stage. That allows the United States to print even more money and not face as severe consequences as it would if its currency was not the global reserve currency. So if the United States dollar lost its global status as the most dominant currency, then all these privileges would be gone, and that would hugely reduce American power on the world stage, and the world would be a very different place. And it is important to understand this situation so you can prepare yourself for a rapidly changing world and safeguard your prosperity and your security. To really understand how US dollar hegemony could end, you have to understand how it came about in the first place. And that involves knowing a little bit about the history of money. For much of history, money was based on precious metals like gold and silver. Far-flung civilizations that had little contact with each other developed currencies based on precious metals. And you can see this throughout human history, and that is because precious metals are inherently valuable, even without its monetary uses. Because precious metals like gold and silver are used in jewelry, in decoration, and there's also a lot of industrial uses for it, and other commercial uses. Even if gold or silver or other precious metals are not used as currency, they are still inherently valuable because of its uses for other purposes, and people will still trade it. So it makes sense for these civilizations to use gold and silver and precious metals for currency because of its inherent value and the fact that it has many uses, even if not used for monetary purposes. The emergence of paper money came about in China in the 7th century, and it developed through the Middle Ages and into the modern era. But for much of this period of the development of paper money, it was generally backed by monetary metals like gold or silver. This was standardized by the gold standard, which was first adopted by Great Britain in 1717 under the direction of Isaac Newton, who was the master of the Royal Mint at the time. Other countries followed the gold standard, and it became a stable monetary system by the end of the 19th century. And in fact, in this period, it became a foundation for a time of great prosperity, invention, and development. And the international gold standard remained the international system until World War I, where a lot of countries, because they had to finance their war, suspended gold convertibility with their currencies and printed a lot of money to finance their wars and left the gold standard. Now let's discuss the United States dollar. So like most other nations before the World War I period, the United States was also on the gold standard. And during the World Wars and the interwar period, a lot of countries were buying materials and supplies from the United States, so the US was able to receive a lot of gold inflows and build its gold reserves. However, in 1933, under the direction of President Franklin Roosevelt, the United States left the gold standard and suspended domestic convertibility of gold. And in fact, under Executive Order 6102, signed by President Roosevelt, the United States government actually confiscated gold from its own citizens and outlawed the ownership of gold coins, bullion, and certificates above a certain amount, which was, I believe, $100. However, the U.S. maintained the gold convertibility of the dollar for foreign exchange markets, and this was cemented in the Bretton Woods system that came about from the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, which created a monetary system globally where the US dollar would be backed by gold, which was enabled by large US gold reserves, and other currencies would be backed by the US dollar. And this system worked until 1971, when Richard Nixon ended the dollar's link to gold. And that was the complete end for the gold standard in the United States. The US dollar effectively became a full fiat currency, and currently today all countries have full fiat currencies, with Switzerland being the last to leave the gold standard. However, fiat money is not really backed by anything. It doesn't have any intrinsic value, and it relies on the mandate of the government, and it also depends on the competence and the goodwill of the government that manages it. It's been over 40 years since the end of the Bretton Woods system, but the legacy of the Bretton Woods system means that the US dollar is still the global reserve currency, but this is changing. Because the US dollar, like every other currency in the world right now, is a fiat currency, it doesn't have any special status like it did during the Bretton Woods system. It's not backed by gold anymore. There's no special reason other countries should use the US dollar as the global reserve currency. They do so as a legacy of the Bretton Woods system, and also because of the size of the US economy and the transparency of the US system at the moment. But these things are changing, and they are changing rapidly. Geopolitical developments are pushing countries to move away from the US dollar. Countries don't want to be vulnerable to US sanctions, and they want to safeguard their security and their prosperity. And because US sanctions can really cripple a country's economy if they rely on US dollars, it is very important for a lot of countries to move away from the US dollars, and they're really incentivized to do so. You can look at Russia. Even before the Russia-Ukraine situation, Russia was already removing US dollar assets. And there was a huge reduction in US dollar holdings in the past decade. And they will continue to de-dollarize because of what's happening right now with the United States weaponizing the US dollar and freezing US dollar assets held by Russia. But it's not just Russia. China, the second biggest economy in the world by nominal GDP and the biggest by purchasing power, is also partnering with Russia to diversify away from US dollars. And it has done so for a while now. And you can look at other countries like Iran, but also a lot of countries are under some form of US sanctions. In fact, 1 in 10 countries are under some form of US sanctions, and they all want to protect themselves from the United States and have a economically independent system that would not be so vulnerable to US sanctions. And it's not just countries that are opposed to the US that want to safeguard their security and their economic independence. Even US allies want to do so, because reliance on US dollars make any country vulnerable to US foreign policy, and no one wants to be under economic control of the United States, even US allies. For example, the EU, which is a steadfast ally to the US, is trying to diversify from the US dollar. So is India, which is a ally of the US and a partner with the US in the Indo-Pacific region. The geopolitical situation is becoming risky and unpredictable, and even reliable US allies want to be able to be financially independent and to safeguard their economic security. But it's not just the geopolitical developments that are pushing the decline of US dollar dominance. US economic and financial problems also weaken the US dollar. There is very high inflation with the US dollar right now, and inflation is predicted to get even worse. The United States has been printing money in a out of control manner, and if you look at the money supply, you can see a 5-fold increase in the money supply over the past 2 years. The United States is accumulating a huge national debt of $30 trillion, and eventually people will not be as willing to buy US bonds and lend money to the United States with such a huge debt because of the low likelihood of being paid without actions like raising taxes and printing money, which hurt the US economy and hurt the US currency. And even if all of this was gone, nevertheless, the United States on the global economic arena is declining in its share of global GDP. All these developments, both geopolitical and with the economic problems of the US economy itself, are undermining the hegemony of the US dollar and could potentially end the hegemony of the US dollar. And this de-dollarization process is accelerating. Countries don't want to be at the mercy of US sanctions, even US allies. And sanctions on Russia make this very clear. Russia, for example, is moving to make gas sales done in rubles, and the lucrative China-Saudi Arabia oil trade could potentially switch to the yuan. There has been a rise in foreign exchange reserves of non-traditional currencies, and also a rise in gold reserves led by China and Russia to diversify away from US dollar foreign exchange reserves. China and Russia have been building up gold reserves for years, and this accumulation is accelerating. They are making moves toward a greater monetary role for gold to replace the dominance of the US dollar. And Russia recently linked their currency, the ruble, to gold and gas to protect their economy from US sanctions and to boost their currency. So we know that US dollar hegemony is in decline and could potentially end. But what does this have to do with you? And what actions can you take to safeguard your prosperity and your security? Well, we know that US dollar hegemony underpins a lot of American power, and this allows the US to borrow money cheaply and easily and maintain a huge national debt. It allows the US to levy sanctions and cripple other countries' economies. It allows the US people and the US as a whole to have a artificially high purchasing power. And it gives the US dollar high liquidity, which benefits America and Americans. And we know that the United States can print a lot of money without serious consequences yet, because of the high demand for US dollars, and that is because of US dollar dominance. So the end of US dollar hegemony will mean all of these privileges for the United States will end. And that would mean the US would be a much weaker and less prosperous country. So when you consider your investment decisions, understand that US power is in decline, and the end of US dollar hegemony would really undermine US power worldwide. And you should factor that into your investment decisions. And in particular, you should avoid US Treasury bonds because it will be risky to hold if and when US dollar dominance ends, because it will be much harder for the United States to borrow money cheaply and easily, and you may face a potential default on US Treasuries. And even if US Treasuries don't default, the US has to pay it somehow, and this likely would have to do with huge money printing, which has already been happening in the past 2 years, and that would further devalue your dollar assets like Treasuries. Another form of action I recommend is to convert your wealth from US dollars to other assets like stocks, private equity, real estate, commodities, and you should give special consideration for gold because of the potential greater monetary role for gold. You could also consider cryptocurrencies, although I'm hesitant to make that suggestion because of the volatility and the unpredictability of trading with cryptocurrencies. And personally, I have not formed a stance on cryptocurrencies yet, but it's something you could consider. You could also think about diversifying away from the US, and that involves diversifying your investments, your assets, even your residence. But all of this is dynamic. The world is a rapidly changing place. Nothing is for certain, and that is why it's so important to take action to prepare yourself for this scenario so that you can protect your wealth and your prosperity. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, make sure to give it a like and comment your thoughts, and comment on what you want me to discuss next, because I'm here to make videos that you can learn a lot from on business, on money, on self-improvement, and I want to help you guys, so let me know what you want me to discuss. Also, make sure to subscribe for more helpful content, and all of these actions help me and helps the video with the YouTube algorithm so we can spread the message and help more people. So it's very important for you to take these actions and help with the engagement and boost the video. Thank you for watching once again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.